and welcome to the 31st episode of the Naus cEDH podcast. Unfortunately, today, Kian and Kevin couldn't make it, but I have a special guest in their replacement. This is our episode for our winner interview for Eminence's Punt City 2, and joining me is the champion of that event, the new mayor in town, Brian Colville, better known as BoshNRoll. How's it going, Brian?
It's going really well. Happy to be here again.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you. So to start with, before we get started with this episode, we have two sponsors that we'd like to shout out. The first of which is the Mana Vault. The Mana Vault is a new LGS in the Metro Milwaukee area. It specializes in everything Eternal events. They're running the biggest cEDH tournaments in Wisconsin right now. All of us at Naus attend them, and it's pretty sweet. They recently had a 52-person event, which was super awesome, and they have a 64-person event coming up April 29th. So if you're in the Wisconsin area and you want to play some cEDH with the boys, make sure you come out to the Mana Vault. Thank them for supporting us and, supporting our community. Our second sponsor for today is Eminence Gaming. Eminence Gaming is an awesome tournament organizer and tournament company. I believe that you work with them a little bit, Brian. Is that correct?
It's true. They also sponsor the BoshNRoll YouTube channel, so they're out there.
Yeah, they're out there. They're making moves, and they're absolutely awesome. I do casting for Eminence. All the boys play in their events, and we love supporting them, and they love supporting us. So we can't shout them out enough. So thank you to Eminence Gaming and Eminence Events. Other than that, we have our patrons that we're going to shout out. So thank you to Doot, Usable Object, Scorish, MP Pfefferman, Jeff Bezos, Domino, Blargarg, Just Ice, Geos Justin, and our Chad Naus patron, Valhalla C. If you'd like to support us, you can do so at patreon.com/sadnaus. You can get a shout out or even appear in an episode. We've got merch dropping soon. So if you want to be a part of that, make sure to get in on the Patreon. But other than that, we will move right into the main phase. So today we are interviewing Brian Colville, Mr. BoshNRoll. He has previously won Monarch's Oktoberfest in 2022 and only now has become Eminence's most recent champion by taking down Punt City 2. So it's been, I think at time of recording, it's been like 2 weeks since Punt City 2, maybe a little bit longer than that. How have you been since the event, Brian? We haven't seen each other in a little bit. How are you feeling, and how has your life changed since becoming an Eminence champion?
Well, it is certainly fun to have the feather in my cap of has played 2 cEDH tournaments and received first place in both. That's pretty cool. I was actually joking with Mikey from Eminence before the event. We were just messaging back and forth on Discord a little bit, and he just out of nowhere was like, how sick would it be if you repeated? And I was like, the thought has occurred to me. And it not thinking, I mean, I don't show up to tournaments thinking I'm not going to win them, but also like understand that Magic has variance and bad matchups and whatever. So the fact that it actually converted was really exciting. But honestly, after that first hit of like the Twitter brain chemicals of like, I won the thing, and then 2 days later the brain chemicals of here's my tournament report from the thing, it's just back on with my life. I record Vintage, Modern, Legacy every single day. I'm a full-time Magic content creator, so right back in. I had a big draft tournament this past weekend, drafted 6 sets over 2 days, and I had to study for that, so I don't get to linger very often on one tournament or one thing, so just on to the next.
Yeah, congratulations on that, by the way. I think last time that we spoke, you were just recently becoming a full-time content creator, so it's really cool to see you still doing it and doing it full-time, and you're kind of living the dream, so congrats to you on that. Also, yeah, that's kind of wild, right? Like, no time to process. It's kind of like, hey, keep grinding and on to the next. But it must have been pretty nice, like you said, to enter 2 and win 2. People, when I know that when we were casting the event, we did like our power rankings of like, who do we rank, who do we think is going to perform well, and who do you look out for during the event? And we kept mentioning your name because we were like, oh, Brian just won another event, and like we made this joke about like the best player in the room, and there were a lot of really good players in the room. This time around compared to the last event that we played, seasoned players from other formats that are really talented at Magic. And we joked a lot that this is probably the most stacked competitive Commander tournament that's happened yet, just because the amount of legacy players and grinders, and Drake Sasser was there, Brian Cook was there, and then you had tournament winners that were there from other EDH events. Like, it was a pretty tall task to take it down, and so it was pretty cool to see you repeat, and not only repeat, but repeat in what I would argue was a higher stage this time around.
Yeah, also, I just want to shout out real quick on that list of names, Michael Mapson, who is not on the cEDH map, no pun intended, but he's a legacy expert. He has a legacy podcast. He got second place at a legacy Grand Prix a little while ago. He's a boss, and he was in the top 16 pod with Brian Cook after the cut in the Swiss. He was just carving up the Swiss with what seemed like mostly a fake deck I'd never heard of, having never played the format really seriously, and he was just carving it up, and shout out to Mapson, as well as everyone else you just said.
I love that you call that a fake deck, because I talked to Michael about it during the event, and that deck is brewed by Sam Black, and that's his iteration of this is what I think competitive Commander is. And I was talking with Michael about it, and I was like, some of those cards you're playing I would consider suboptimal, but it's cool that it's Sam's deck and you're playing an iteration of it, and that you all come from these different formats, and that you're still able to carve through Swiss like it's practically nothing. It was something that I would look at it and I'd be like, well, this isn't cEDH, yet you're performing with it like it is, and proving people wrong, especially this old guard mentality of well, that's not competitive Commander,
Right. So I will walk back my statement a little bit. Fake is just a toxic word that doesn't need to be said about a deck. But I didn't know Sam Black brewed it. I had never heard of this Commander before. I'd never seen it. I'd never seen a deck with it. Those who are following all the articles that come out, I know Sam's been writing and Sperling's been writing, and a lot of major hitters from mainstream Magic are now in the cEDH space. So it's cool that Sam Black, a 60 card all-timer, honestly, could make a list that Mapson, a 60 card expert, if not all-timer, and those two combination made for a top 16 finish. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and along with Michael Mapson, Billy Mitchell, they have that Depths podcast together. They both were there. So when we were talking about the 60 card player scene kind of getting into EDH, even if a lot of them might have already been into EDH but not really playing in the competitive scene before, this event was really awesome and really cool to bring all these people together and get a bunch of differing opinions. We did an interview, I think, with Michael, where he was like, this was really fun and I really enjoyed it. It might not be for me though. And that brutal honesty was really cool to hear from someone that's hey, I'm trying, I'm not going to write it off. And I feel like a lot of people do kind of write off competitive Commanders. So it was really nice to hear that.
He probably told this story, but he was 4-1 at the end of day one. And was like, there's a Pioneer RCQ tomorrow. I just might not even show up for day two. I don't know if this is for me. Even though he was basically locked for the cut already. Things are for different people. I know there are a number of people on site in the hangout hours after the tournament who were doing a Philly, Delaware 2-day RCQ weekend and just coming to hang out and play EDH in the evening. So, different things for different folks.
Yeah, exactly. But it was definitely a very fun event, and I hadn't seen anything like this before. A lot of people, a lot of internet personalities that talk a lot, finally coming out and showing up, and saying I'm here to compete and I'm here to play, and in essence putting their money where their mouth is, and it showed, right? You've been playing EDH for a very long time. We established this last time we had you on, and then now won a cEDH event, and then coming in again and placing again, and not only placing but winning, and then other personalities like Bryant making top 16 after, and he would probably notably say the same thing, talking a lot of shit about their thoughts on cEDH and deck building and stuff. And so it was really cool and really fun. The atmosphere was different, I would say, for sure. And that kind of brings me into my next question about how do you think that this event specifically compared to Oktoberfest, which was the other event that you won?
I think they both ran pretty smoothly as far as nuts and bolts tournament stuff. The one big procedural logistic change that this event did that Oko didn't was no last turn when time is called. when time is called, whoever's playing right now, finish your turn and the game is over, rather than a full loop around the table one more time. And that probably saved 2 or 3 hours on each day of competition, honestly, because once the clock's not running, everybody's taking their last Hail Mary and trying to put one last win on the stack before the game is over and it's just a draw. Like, just stop. And I was worried about that because in all competitive formats, I like to play the deck with Supreme Verdict, not the deck with Goblin Guide. And like, I want to slow everything down, and Blue Farm is in that pocket too. And I am genuinely worried about the round clock more than I'm worried about my opponents in most games of Magic. And not having that turn, I was worried, but it actually worked out really smooth, and I barely noticed it over the course of the tournament.
Yeah, that's a decision that took a lot of like thought, and it took a lot of data to determine if it was really worth it to award players with an extra turn after round is called. And I think that what ended up coming out of it was that in 60 card play, it makes sense because extra turns is just you and your opponent fighting for the win, one last chance, and it's very quick and it's very fast. You're not able to do a million tasks or take a million game actions for 30 minutes while you're trying to find a way to win. You are putting your spells on the stack and you have 5 turns to figure it out, right? And what they determined was that in EDH, it's just not worth it, right? Like, the game is a draw, and if each person got an extra turn, like you said, it adds an extra round or an extra hour, sometimes even more, to round time, and then everybody's pissed off and nobody's having fun because, a day that should have ended at 5 is ending at 9. And that really is unfortunate. And it's something they adopted from online events, which is really cool to see implemented in person. I know even like my LGS now, they don't do turns anymore. They just call it after time. And it's like, okay, now we all get to be done playing at 10 instead of midnight. And now we can play casual games until midnight and have a good time. And so it's really cool to see that implemented into tournament play.
Right. It only came up once where I had a silence and 2 win attempts in my hand, and there were 20 minutes left on the clock when the person furthest from me was taking kind of a long, ponderous turn. Then they passed with 12 minutes on the clock, and that person took kind of a long, ponderous turn. Then the person in front of me, there was like 6 minutes left on the clock, and I was like shaking in my chair, like, come on. Like, yeah, it resolves, come on. Like, yeah, shortcut it, please. And just like, there needs to be 1 second on the clock when it goes to my turn for me to present this triple win attempt, which did end up getting stuffed. I did get a turn. I think there was 30 seconds on the clock when they passed, and I shot my shot, and it didn't work, and we went to the draw, but I would have been distraught if I didn't get my shot.
It didn't even get the chance, yeah.
Yeah, but generally speaking, like 60 card Magic, you got to play best 2 out of 3, and you get 50 minutes, not 90. And at the end of 90 minutes, what have you all been doing for the last hour and a half if the game's not over? Like, come on. Like, I think that's reasonable. The other structural difference was that Oktoberfest had a cut to top 32, where the top 8 players skipped the first elimination round and went straight into top 16. So I guess they actually cut to top 40. Yeah. Yeah, they cut to top 40, and 8 of us got like an elimination round bye, which does add a round to the day, but I thought that tournament structure was really cool. It incentivizes not just handshakes once you're in cutoff range. There was actually something real to play for. So that was cool, but I also like being out an hour early. So that's something that the TOs can think about. Yeah,
I know that the way that they try to incentivize it in eminence structure is that your seeding determines seat order when you get to the cut. So like if you are first in standings, you're going to get first in seat order. So like usually if you're paired up in final pods, your standing, like the first 3 pods, usually their standing is locked in, right? Like you've made top 16. So then it's determining, do you want to play for turn order? And for a lot of people, that's pretty valuable. To some people, it doesn't matter what turn you have; you feel confident that you can win the game. So like the idea is though, like, hey, if you think that you know that you need one more win to take the first place guy out of first place, and now you have first seed up into top 4, like that should incentivize you enough to play. But it is going to be interesting to see how tournament structure evolves, especially since the format is so new and tournaments regarding it are so new. There's a lot of room for growth and a lot of things that can change in the future. And I agree. It's going to be something to chew on and to think about.
Yeah, I like the innovation in the space, though. The fact that 2 TOs are doing the same thing, but there are, things worth discussing that were cool about each event. I think that is cool, and there's opportunities to keep evolving.
Yeah,
I like it.
That's awesome to hear. As far as like players go, what was your experience in the games? Like, do you think that this was do you think that this was a higher level of play than you're used to experiencing when you play like pickup games on the internet or at other events, or even if you've ever done cEDH at locals? Or was this like, were there games where you felt like, wow, this is not the level of play I would expect at a tournament?
So kind of a trick question for me, because I don't play the online tournaments. I don't really have time to just fire up a casual cEDH game in the Discord with 3 randos. Like, that's not part of my experience.
Yeah.
If I'm playing cEDH at my house on my webcam, it's like face down testing for an upcoming event with 3 people who I hold in high regard. And that's really my experience with that. When I'm out playing casual, if I'm at a Command Fest or whatever, I'm trying to play casual. Like we talked about this last time, the second the tournament's over, I'm like, who's got casual decks?
Yeah.
And I would rather do that with my free time than play more cEDH. But compared to the other gaming that I've done a number of online tournaments. Some of them are unreleased at this point, like self-contained content tournaments, so I can't talk about the results. But between those and Okotober and my pods here at Punt City 2, I felt like I was doing a lot of the work to keep the table alive compared to my previous experiences. Like, you could count on someone in most pods. Like, when Oda just resolved, I'm next in turn order. If I could have answered this, I would have. I'm sorry, someone handle it. And then they just don't. Or, like, I spend 3 counter spells on somebody's terrifying spell, and I'm like, table, I need to lay up here. And they're just like, we don't have anything. And I felt like I was doing the work for the table in more games than I would expect to. I played 9 games at Punt City 2, and probably, it felt like 6 of them, nobody else had an interactive spell at the table at any point. So that was just kind of, it might have been my lane that just happened to be the pods I paired into, or the type of interaction they had didn't work in those situations, or people just tend to remember bad things more than they remember good things. So it might be my brain telling me later that it was like that, but definitely felt like there were people with like Mystic Remora in play, 18 cards in hand, and just like, I got nothing here, and then they lose. Like, they weren't lying to win on their turn. The lethal spells on the stack, they're just like, yeah, I got nothing.
Interesting. I wonder if that's like a deck building constraint, or if like, because like I heard there was a lot of instances of people like dying with interaction in their hand, like trying to outplay the table and sandbagging to the point of their own detriment. Like, I heard a lot of reports where like, if people, and I don't recommend anybody do this, by the way, but like people at the end of the game would be like, can I see your hand? And then they would reveal and there would be like 2 counter spells in their hand, and then they'd be like, what the hell, man? Like, why didn't you cast that? First off, if you are doing that, it's like poker, never reveal your hand. Like, just keep that to yourself. But
muck it, face down, send it home.
Yeah, but I did hear like a couple instances of that, where people being like, oh, the table had interaction, but they were trying to hold off on it or die with it in their hand, because like they would rather have it for their turn than stop this guy from winning. But I don't know. It's a whole tournament belief thing, where like, do you keep it for yourself, or do you use it because you can't win if you lose?
Well, I will tell you what I do, and it's, if I can answer the spell that's going to kill me, I will. All this like level system shell game stuff, it doesn't matter. Like, if Thassa's Oracle is on the stack, what are you saving your counter magic for? You're gonna lose. And maybe the person currently presenting their win and you will win now that your hand is empty. But like, you gotta roll the dice on that. It goes from 0% to win the pod to like, 2% or whatever, or maybe 10, 20, depending on their archetype or what's in their hand. It's preposterous to just let a win resolve when you could stop it.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I feel like there's this mantra where like, oh, we're playing EDH, right? So there's politics and there's mind games and all this stuff involved in the game. And it's like, how about you just put your spell in the stack, and like, not like, because you're gonna lose. Like that's the gist of it. If you don't interact, you'll lose. And it's interesting to hear your perspective that you kind of had to play table police for a lot of your games, because a lot of players that's not their goal, right? They don't want to be policing the table. They want to be either the threat or attempting to win the game, because usually if you're policing the table, you're just spending your interaction. You never have it for yourself. But you obviously must have been doing it in a way that was beneficial to you, obviously, because you're not losing, and in a way that if your opponents don't have the interaction either, it opens you up for a line on your turn.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is archetype. Like, some archetypes just can't wait. All they can do is present wins. Like, I played against Max, who top 16'd on Florian. Again, I played him twice at Okotober, so I've played 3 matches against him across through 2 tournaments. And that deck is scary, but other than like 2 Red Blasts and a SWAT, what's Rakdos going to do to a convoluted stack where someone else is presenting a win? Like, we know what he's about when he sits down, and I don't expect much out of him on the fight. So, like, that's fine. But I am playing a deck, like, by design. I chose it and I built it especially in a way where if nobody's winning, I'm pulling ahead. Where that's not true of every deck, and they do kind of have to shove. But it is my experience in cEDH that the second or third win attempt wins. So why would I ever try to be the first one? And I just choose an archetype that plays well into that pocket.
Yeah, no, that's a really good strategy. And we kind of talked about it last episode about how you kind of use like I would call them like fake win attempts in order to open your windows wider, right? So you talked like last time about how like Ad Naus is mainly just a Thoughtseize, right? I'm going to cast this card to get cards out of your hand, and then now my window is wider for the next attempt I have to win. And I was curious if you kind of treated this event similarly, or was it more so biding your time and going off when you see fit, as opposed to trying to like layer win conditions? Like you said that you had that one game that went to a draw where you had 3 layered combos for a win condition, but each one got stuffed, and then at the end it was a draw anyways. Were the games that you were winning, were they also kind of this like, I have Ad Naus, Underworld Breach, and Thoracle, or was it more so like, I'm just going to bide my time for the correct window and save it for when I know it's good for me to go off?
It was primarily the second one, where I'm chilling. I'm lit. Basically, I think almost all of my wins, except for the one in the finals where I deflecting swatted someone's peer, it's just LOL. But all of the games that actually went beyond turn 4 that I was in, they ended exactly the same. I have Rhystic, Mystic, and or Crom in play, and someone else goes for a win. The whole table fights over it. I pitch in, I do my part. I'm drawing cards while the fight happens, and then I untap and win because I know the table is spent. And just the second win attempt is going to be more successful than the first in most situations. And I just positioned myself to always be the second or third win attempt. Like, I'm not putting Underworld Breach on the stack before anyone has, cast a single counterspell in the game. I'm not going to cast the first must counter in the game. It's not going to happen. And like you were saying, the Ad Nauseam or Intuition, these big scary instants, I might test with one of those in the person in front of me's end step to see, like, can we get through here? Or are they just going to like dispel it? And then we go to my turn and I play Tim to draw a card and pass. And I'm fine with that. I'm not going to like Force of Will, Force of Negation, Pact of Negation on an end step to get an Ad Nos to resolve. Like, sure, that's in the graveyard now. Let's continue drawing cards.
Yeah. Do you I don't know if we really dove into this last time we had you on, but your mulligan decisions when you're playing in a tournament. There's been like a little bit of a meta shift, but like in how people evaluate mulligans, and there's kind of two schools of thought. The first is that you mulligan for a plan, right? If your hand has a plan, it tells you what that plan is. You usually want to keep that. So like for me, right, I'm a Najeela player. So if I see in my hand I have like a Derevi or a way to tutor a Derevi, mana acceleration, and I know that like my plan is like, okay, get out Najeela, make warriors, and then on turn 3 attempt to drop a Derevi, right? Or there's like this new school of thought where it's like you mulligan to card draw and you mulligan to card draw aggressively. Rhystic Study wins games. Mystic Remora wins games. So you want to have some type of advantage in the game that's more than just mana, because mana only gets you so far if you have nothing to cast with it. And I'm curious if like how do you evaluate your mulligans when you're playing Blue Farm, which is notoriously a very hard to mulligan deck. Just because the color fixing is not that great. It's 4 colors and things like that. Like, how do you kind of plan out your hands, and what were the types of things that you were keeping, if you can like kind of recall those decisions?
So generally, in Rhystic, Mystic, Esper Sentinel are the gold standard. If you could put one of those into play on turn 1, I'm probably keeping. Depending on the texture of the pod, I might prioritize Mindbreak Trap, Force of Will, Force of Negation. Generally what I'm looking for is a turn 2 Tymna. Like, if I can put a creature in front of it, like, if I can curve Esper Sentinel, Ragavan, or Serra Ascendant into Tymna, it's the dream. But I also play a ton of 1-drops. I guess by a ton, I mean 3. But the 3 I just listed, I'll basically keep a hand in first or second position with any of those 3 1-drops and the means to cast it. And in third and fourth seat, I don't count Ragavan as highly, but I'm still in on Serra Ascendant and Esper Sentinel. So yeah, I want to be able to either present a card draw engine, accelerate Tymna, or put the big chunky 6/6 down. Those are the kind of things I'm looking for. And if I just like see Rogsai at the table, I might dig a little harder for a piece of free interaction if I'm behind them in turn order.
Yeah. And looking at your list, I see like a couple choices that are like it depends on the meta that you play, but traditional and non-traditional, right? Specifically, like I see that you're on some cards that some people aren't super high on anymore. Like a good example is like Serra Ascendant. A lot of people don't play Serra Ascendant, or like Professional Facebreaker and Loyal Apprentice. Some people opt for more aggressive pieces of like acceleration, whether that be like creatures that exhume more card draw, like Ledger Shredder or things like that, or they would add like more mana rocks and mana. And you also do like Cavern of Souls in your lands because you have this dense grouping of humans that makes it worthwhile to name Cavern of Souls or name under Cavern of Souls. So I'm curious, do you feel like these cards I mean, obviously you must feel like they perform for you because you've played them in multiple tournaments now, but do you have like a specific take on why those cards are better than other options in your deck and why you choose to play them?
So my list between Oko and Punt City 2 changed by 7 cards, and 4 of them were the cards you just mentioned. Loyal Apprentice, Facebreaker, Serra Ascendant, and Containment Priest were all cards I didn't play at Oko. And then Dothy Voidwalker wasn't in my deck at Oko either. So I'm plus 5 creatures in my list, which I basically... Oko, I had played some cEDH. I was pretty new to Blue Farm, and just like some face-down tournament testing kind of grinding evenings. But I did not have 20 games with Blue Farm under me when I started round 1 at Oko. And now I have probably 100 or more, so which is still not massive compared to some of the real deck experts in the scene, but I understand things better. And once you understand that you're not a Turbo Naus deck, and if you we're already a bad Turbo Naus deck. Even if we build Blue Farm with the pedal to the metal, it's still a bad Turbo Naus deck compared to Rogsai or any of the non-blue Ad-Naus decks that really just rip. So why are we even trying to do that? And the games that I'm happy with are the ones where I'm connecting with an evasive creature, preferably that's also a hate bear, and drawing a card with Tymna. And Professional Facebreaker has evasion, and it makes treasures, and it doubles up on Tymna, because then you get a card and a treasure for every connection. Loyal Apprentice has evasion, and it poops out a creature every turn for Tymna. Dothy Voidwalker, a hate bear with evasion for Tymna. Like, that, this is the theme here. And I just leaned all the way into that. The 7 cards that I cut were City of Traders, Imperial Seal, Pact of Negation, Pyroblast, Time Twister, Windfall, and Burgi. So that's a card negative tutor and 6 high velocity spells for 5 humans, or 5 creatures, 4 of them are humans, Dam, and Hallowed Fountain. Like, I just pumped the brakes in deck building, and I'm not a Turbo Naus deck. I'm a bad wheel deck. Cut the wheels, cut the turbo stuff. I'm never happy putting Pact of Negation on this deck, because, like, I have to pay for that. I'm never going to use it defensively. It's only for offense, and I'm not playing the deck in a way that wants an offensive counterspell in that way. So it's just out. And I think I'm a couple cards too deep on this creature thing that I'm doing. Probably want Blue Elemental Blast over one of the red humans, whether it's Facebreaker or Loyal Apprentice. That's probably where the list is going next for me. Then I'll see if I want another piece of interaction. But the proof of concept is there. I mean, I won the tournament, so whatever you feel about this list, including myself, scoreboard. But I think it's a little deeper than it needs to be on the creature stuff. But the idea was just put creatures into play, let everyone kill each other, chip in where you need to on a counter fight, and when the dust settles, you'll have 2 or 3 creatures in play that generate card advantage, and other people will have nothing.
No, I think that's like really, really interesting insight there, because Tymna Kraum goes through like an evolution, right? And it evolved from being a traditional mid-range deck to being a turbo ad nauseum deck with white as protection. And then, you are the most recent placement holder with this deck. Like, you're one of the best pilots of it, clearly. And you're kind of reverting back to this more mid-range approach, but with new cards and with new strategies that otherwise haven't really been implemented. Lavinia is a card that when Oktoberfest happened, that was a fairly new tech for this list that people weren't really high on, right? And it kind of came from the whole, defense grid's really good in ROG side decks. Like, can you have a similar effect to that in Blue Farm, but one that's more beneficial to you? And like you were saying, if you're performing in a way where you're kind of the table police inherently, whether you want to be or not, Lavinia maybe doesn't hurt you as much if you're not counting on your opponents for interaction anyways. If you can just, determine on your own that my deck's good enough to hold its own at a table with 3 other players, then them casting spells is not a worry to you.
I mean, Lavinia walks that tightrope extremely well, because if she's in play, I'm not that scared of things opponents could do. Like, you could still Dark Ritual, but you can't Naus because you don't have 5 lands. Like, you can Breach, but you can't LED because it costs 0. Like, what is going to happen that I care about where I need the table to help me fight with Lavinia in play? But also, Lavinia unlocks with just 1 land, Dispel, Flusterstorm, Pyroblast, whatever. You can still have a fight with Lavinia in play. She just turns off Pitchcast, Force of Will, and the free magic, the swats and fierces. But your opponent, whoever's trying to push the win, can't swat fierce or force either because you have Lavinia. So what could go wrong? This isn't Defense Grid. It's not Teferi Time Raveler. It's somewhere in between. And a lot of the time in a cEDH game, someone resolves a Dranith, and one player says, and two players say, oh, good. And like Lavinia's the same way. Like she is holding down whoever the threat is, unless it's you.
Yeah.
So at which point, what are you going to do about it? You can't force, you can't SWAT, you can't fierce, etc. So
Yeah.
I love asymmetrical hate pieces. That's absolutely my jam.
No, and it's proven, I think, itself to be a very necessary card in a strategy like that, where you're trying to play a longer game, bide your time, and kind of shut down your opponents in a way that doesn't hinder you at all. Like as an asymmetrical piece, I think Lavinia has been it has proven itself as a good tech at this point, and I think people probably should adjust to it if they haven't already.
Right, and the Cavern of Souls that you mentioned, I did go deep. I have 17 creatures in this deck, and I think 11 or 12 of them are humans. Like that was part of my thought experiment in tuning up this list. But really, if my deck just had Tymnit in the command zone and Ranger Captain and Grand Abolisher as the only three creatures that are humans, I would still play Cavern of Souls, because the Cavern tech came from Matt Sperling. He gave that to me before Oko, and I went and used it. It was insane. Those Ristic Study games where everyone has 10 cards in their hand, and how can anyone break through this? Cavern on human, Grand Abolisher, I win. I don't care if there are 40 cards in my three opponents' hands. Add them all up. They don't matter.
Yeah.
We're done.
So no, that's really cool to hear, because a lot of people would be like, oh, well, it doesn't do anything for you unless you have a human and blah, blah. But like you said, you have consistent access to Tymna at all times, and even making sure your Tymna resolves is important. And then not only that, but yeah, you think Grand Abolisher or Ranger Captain are good. Well, try them when they can't be countered and they're fucking nuts. So yeah, right. It's super fun to see that. In regards to Punt City 2 specifically, Brian, I'm curious on if you did anything different in preparation for this event. Did you, like you mentioned, kind of some testing groups, right? Like how you might play, if you're going to play on Discord at all, if you have any time, you're going to do it with people that you hold in high regard and people that you trust that are going to give you good games and good data for entering a tournament. I'm curious if you did any more of that than you did for the last event that you prepared for, if you did any different things leading up to it, studied any decks or anything, or was this pretty standard for you leading into an event?
I did, honestly, very little specifically for Punt City 2. In the time between October and Punt City, I did a number of those to this point unreleased content tournaments that I can't talk about the result of, but I did get to tune my list throughout. I appeared on Play to Win. I appeared on Playing with Power. I've done things with people, Modanon, Mental Misplay. Like I guest on streams. That's one thing that I forgot to mention earlier. That's a place that I play cEDH. And I was just goofing around with like the Sarah Ascendant was a change I made immediately after October. Just like, this looks like fun. And every time I cast it, it was a complete house. And I keep hands on the strength of it. Like I'll literally keep a one-lander with Sarah Ascendant, like come at me. And I'm in. So like that one just earned its spot. And all those games where I was playing with, the Play to Win crew or the Playing with Power crew, like these are people who do this as at least part of their living, if not their whole living, and they're deep in the format as anyone. And just conversations with those, the way those games came out, I would like change a card here or there. And I was on this human heavy, creature heavy build for the last couple content things I did. And then honestly, like Wednesday before Punt City, I was driving out Friday morning. So like 24 hours before I left my house, I was like, I got 2 slots that I'm not totally happy with. I think it was Bergie and Pyroblast were the last 2 things that I cut. And I was like, 2 Pyroblast seems like a lot because I am playing Red Blast, and Bergie doesn't really feed any of my plans anymore. And Dam and Containment Priest went in. Like in that last 24 hours, I was just like, I don't want to lose to specifically Winota and Containment Priest. I just thought about how decks end games in this format. and basically every non-Grixis core ends the game by cheating some sort of creature into play, whether it's Eldritch Evolution or Winota or Kinnan or Reanimate or whatever, Animate Dead. Like, just Priest hits basically every non-Grixis endgame, and it's a human. I was like, why didn't I do this 3 months ago? This rules. And I'll be honest, I did not cast Containment Priest once at Punt City. I don't even think I looked at the art on it until that 40-card SWAT in the finals, at which point it didn't matter. Like, I just never saw it. But Damn stabilized and won me several pods. So that Damn is a lock slot. Containment Priest is a meta choice for me moving forward.
No, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, Damn is a sweeper that most people aren't high on. So it's cool to see you playing it and saying that, like, I'm blocking this in as, like, not leaving the deck. Because, like, you are on Fire Covenant, and, like, some people play Toxic Deluge, but I can see why you would rather play something like Damn and just wipe the board and not utilize your life total if you don't have to, especially since it's such an important resource in this game. So really, I really like talking about your deck choices, because I think that you put a lot of thought into your deck choices, and your thought is fueled by data and playing and decision making, not like, oh, I think this looks cool. You know what I mean? It's like it starts that way, and then you play it out until it no longer works. And I really like that. And you're not afraid to say, like, this no longer works and I'm going to cut it. Not like, oh, well, wheels are just so good, so I should just keep playing them. Like, no, wheels don't help my strategy. So out with wheels they go. And now that I'm not playing wheels, what is Bergie doing for me? Not a whole lot. So out with Bergie it goes, right? And, like, you just keep moving on from that point, and then you're building the deck that you're comfortable playing. And I think more people should probably implement strategies like that.
Right. And I've been playing Magic for most of Magic's 30 years. Like, 96 I found the game, 97 I was, like, really playing with my friends, and it's probably been in the last 4 or 5 years that I figured out that there is nothing sacred or untouchable about deck lists you find on the internet. Like, the person who won the tournament whose list you're copying was also just some person who tried a new card or whatever. They're not a genius. They're not, like, unless it is just, like, probably Brad Nelson has done every piece of math there is to get to his perfect standard 75 for that weekend. But general, like, Joe Schmo PTQ winner probably net decked the list too. And there's nothing sacred about it. If you are looking at a card like Containment Priest, and it's like, how do I beat Winota? How do I beat Kinnan? How do I shut down these specific things? Containment Priest does all that, but, you know, playing with power has that low on their power rankings or whatever the heck, you know. Yeah. I don't even know if that's true, but
it's probably just not even on their power ranking.
Yeah, exactly. Like I heard on a podcast that Sadnaz said Containment Priest wasn't playable. You know, like, who cares? What does anyone know about anything? Like, if you see a problem and you see a solution, you don't have to listen to the talking heads of the format. Just put it in your deck.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. The episode that's going to come out after this one is we rank our top 10 decks in cEDH, and we talk about how, like, yeah, the last time we did this, we were listening to content creators, but those guys don't know shit. Like, ironically,
it's true.
Like, we don't know shit either, right? So just, like, do what you think is best, and you'll probably have a better chance and a better time. And something that I think that events like this have shown, and I think tournament data, like, but at the time of recording, it's been released by now, but edhtop16.com is available. It's a resource by Eminence where it shows all the tournament breakdowns of chaos events, command tower events, anything that uses Eminence software. And it shows, like, the conversion rates, what decks were entered, how many times they've been entered, and everything like that. And something that's really shown recently is that pilots that know a deck inside and out, and that's what they play, are always going to perform better, right? Like, you can bring the best deck to a tournament, but if you know a deck better than the best deck, you're probably going to do better with it, especially in a high variance format like cEDH, where it's better to know your deck inside and out. And that's where, like, you see things like in the top 4, the Sisay player that was playing with you, right? Do I think Sisay is the best deck in the format? No, I don't even think it's the best 5-color deck by a long shot. But Malcolm is an amazing Sisay pilot that knows that deck inside and out, so he's going to squeeze games out that he shouldn't, just because of how good he is at that deck. And I think that Like, people should play what they're comfortable with. Put the spells you're comfortable with in your deck and play the deck that you're comfortable with, and you'll probably do better than just being like, well, Blue Farm is the best thing ever, so I'll just play Blue Farm. You, on the other hand, you started that way, right? By saying, like, why would I play anything different than, like, what clearly looks to me to be the best? But now you're one of the best pilots of that deck, and I think that you probably perform with it better than you would if you, say, picked up Kinnan.
So we're skipping a few chapters of my story, which my first cEDH experience was on Mono White Teshar, just Teshar artifact combo, and I loved KCI in Modern, and that sort of thing makes sense to me. And I built that deck in paper, and then I was like, I kind of want a blue deck, and that was when Hermit Druid was going in on Ishai Jeska, and I was like, I like everything that's going on here, so I have Ishai Jeska built. I played a bunch of streams for a couple months on exclusively that deck, and then Streets of New Capenna came out, and my friend and I just really started brewing around Rafine. I have a Rafine Abdel combo stacks deck that I'm actually pretty proud of. I think is pretty tight, but I kept running into this problem where my commander is not castable by any of the fast mana in the format, like Vault, Crypt, JLo, like they just don't help cast Rafine, and that was a deal breaker for me. And it was like probably 2 or 3 months before Oko when I was like, all right, time to learn one of these meta decks, these real decks, air quotes. Like, I've been goofing around with all this other stuff, so I did take a path. I didn't just, like, come out of nowhere and, like, I play the best deck. There is no other choice. You're all dumb. Yeah. I did play worse decks on my path to finding this one, but then this one just clicks and makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. So then for before I want to, like, get into your win, because it was pretty epic, and, like, watching the cast in the stream, it was, like, pretty sick to see how that went down. But before we get into that, I want to talk about your standings leading into the tournament. The reason being because you made it into the top cut by, I would say, like, and you could feel free to argue this with me, but by the skin of your teeth. You made it by, I believe it was 0.5%. You were able to make the cut into top 16, beating out Chris Lasegra, known as Rocket Man, who actually took 4th in Punt City 1. So it was really close, like really, really close. And I was curious if you had any, like, worries leading into top cut, like, man, I might not have enough to make it, like I might not be making the cut. And what was kind of going through your head, or if you were just like, you know what, we're going to see what's going to happen and we're going to ride with it either way.
Yeah, of course. My safe winning in was the round before, day 1, or round 1 on day 2. So round 6 of the tournament. And that one, I left kind of frustrated because 2 of the 4 players at the table just refused to pay for Rhystic Study, and the person with Rhystic Study won the game after I did a lot of work to stabilize the board for everyone, and they were just like, nah, we'll yeet it to Rogsai, thanks. And sorry to those players. I've been ragging on them a little bit, but it's how I feel. And I lost that pod to Alana. She was the Rogsai player, and she top 16s every tournament, so I probably should have known she would win that pod. But what nobody... Or what I don't know if everyone knows this about me, but I am the king of 8th place on Breakers. The Star City Invitational that I won, 8th on Breakers. The Grand Prix that I won, 8th on Breakers. I've been 8th on Breakers at Eternal Weekend twice. 2 of my 5 top 8s were 8th place on Breakers. So, like, I was worried, sure. And my Breakers weren't good either. And I was trying to do tournament math, because this is the second cEDH tournament I've ever played. I don't have any mental shortcuts for figuring out how many places it's reasonable to jump after 1 round. And I needed to jump 16 people. I was 32nd. Like, I had to go the full leap of everybody.
Like a full 180, yeah.
Yeah, and I was, like, walking around with my Eminence app out and, like, looking at the pods and trying to find where they were and, like, who do I need to root for in each pod. And at some point I was like, it doesn't matter. It's out of my hands now. Like, I won my round 7. That's what I needed to do. Now I'm just going to cross my fingers and get ready to drive home early. And, it held up. The BoshNRoll legacy lives on of 16th on Breakers, just bubble right in.
Yeah, no, that's funny because we saw that, and like Chris is a good friend of mine, so like he took 17th, and he's like he's like looking down at his phone, and then looking down at the ground, and I'm like, what happened, dude? Like, what's going on? And he's like, Brian Koval. And it was just like really funny and like a super funny instance, and like it's cool to see, like, when it comes to the cut, the how the points break down, because there's only 5 people with 16 points that get to make the top 16. Everybody else was a guaranteed lock. And so to see how that ends up falling, and the names that were in there, right? It was Dan, who ended up having like a crazy top 16 game. You had Michael Mapson that we were talking about, Max, that player that you played multiple times, who plays the Florian deck. It's really cool. Like, these are cool names to see making that top 16 cut. And I was just curious as to like how you felt in that moment, and what that breakdown was. But as per usual, Brian Koval, calm, cool, and collected, no worries at all.
I mean, I was like, the part of me that's like, I really fucking want this was present in my brain. But then the part of me that's like, I should have found one more match point in the weekend if I wanted it that bad. If you bubble out now, what can you be mad about? Like, and my last round, my win my win into the breaker scrum was against Cam from Play to Win, Mike from Playing with Power, and Jorman, who's in like the Ramp Gig Mental Misplay crew. So it's just like murder pod, and it was earned against a great pod with great people. So it was like, or I said Mike, I meant Ryan from Playing with Power.
Yeah.
So that was just like a phenomenal pod, and we had a great game. Jorman actually presented a triple covered win, but forgot about his Crom trigger on the Thassa's Oracle win. And I should not. So you were talking earlier about like knowing your deck inside and out is worth more than the specific archetype you play. And Jorman was an awesome competitor. He covered his bases. He went for a double protected win into an onboard Ranger Cap, had the final fortune to push through Ranger Cap, untapped, silenced us. We fought over silence. Then he went and presented 2 more wins all in one shot. And it literally came down to forgetting how Crom interacts with Thassa's Oracle, because he cast a Diabolic Intent somewhere in that mix too. He could have cleared his Crom and just been scot-free, but just died to a Swift reconfiguration, just being cast on literally anything. And
oh my god,
I'm not trying to throw shade on Jorman. It's just like one of those things that all these moving pieces, and we all knew what we were playing for too. And he knew he was in a hitter pod, and he actually started comboing and like looked at like his friend who was watching. He's like, bro, I'm sweating here. I'm shaking so bad. And those nerves can catch up to you, and when there's so many little things to keep up with. But,
no, and that's such a common mistake too, right? Like, you forget that you have the Esper Sentinel in play, and then you go for the Thoracle win, and someone just casts a spell, right? Like that's such a simple mistake that can come and bite you, and it's stuff like that like in tournament play, it is a gotcha, right? Like, you're not taking that one back. Sorry. Like, you messed that up, right?
Yeah. The conversation in that moment was like, the Oracle trigger was on the stack with the consult above it, and Jorman passed to me, and I'm like, can we do anything here? And Ryan had just been like, he's on Jetmir. He's like not doing anything. He's just like, I've been F6 for 2 turns now. And Cam was like, I already used my Force of Will. All I got is the Swift reconfiguration. And I was like, that'll do. Pass priority. and we got through it. So
yeah. That's wild.
Yeah.
That's such a crazy game to win in, to make top 16. That's so cool. And then because I know that we're going to run short on time here.
We can keep talking. I'm good. Just roll
okay.
with it.
Yeah, no. Then how did you feel then about your semifinals game? So your first game in the top 16, you were playing against Jason, who was going nuts the entire tournament. I think he won He won like 6 out of 5 rounds, which was absolutely wild. He was 6-1 leading into the the top 16, going first in your pod on Najila, and you kind of ended up taking down the giant there of the event. Was there anything crazy going on, or was it just like a typical BoshNRoll tournament win? Cast your spells and policing the table.
That pod was the most responsible pod I played in all weekend, and I appreciated it a lot. I think that every Rhystic study was paid for at every opportunity. Some Mystic Remoras drew some cards, but whoever has 4 mana. But people were like playing creatures or just not playing spells if Remoras were active. And we had one player who Tainted Pacted, just like a value Tainted Pact. It was just like in someone's end step with no clear plan to the rest of the table. And he exiled like 3 or 4 random cards and stopped on Fierce Guardianship. And he's like, yeah, this looks like the right one for now. And then just like, we knew he had Fierce Guardianship and no one could push. And like, he didn't push a win that turn either. It was just like, pass with Thrasios and Fierce Guardianship face up in my hand. And we had the Tivit player in that pod do a Tainted Pact as well. And so there were multiple Dranniths in play, like basically the whole game, and Tivit was never happening. The Tivit player resolved a Vamp Tutor early on, and I was like, probably just went for Thassa's Oracle. And by probably, I didn't say this in the game, but I'll say it now, like, I knew it was Thassa's Oracle because he kind of bled the card, but he put it on top of his deck after the Tutor. And I was like, he's probably going for Oracle here because Tivit shut off. Just keep it on your radar table. And then me and Najila were just teeing up on Tivit in combat, and he was dead on board, and he had to make a move, and he cast Tainted Pact from hand, and I know he has Oracle, and I'm just like, here we go. My only interaction was Pyroblast, so if he's got this beat, we're dead. And he just went past Time Sieve. It was out. We don't have to think about that anymore. He went past Consult. That was out, so if he doesn't win now, it's not going to happen. And then he stopped on Dam and was like, I think this is the correct one. And then just rat the board and take the combat damage off rather than just shoving a win. And like thinking that he could play the game longer. If the Dranniths are clear, he's out of combat range and send it around the table for another loop. And I was like, hell yeah. Like, let's go. So Najila got wrathed, and Thrasios got wrathed, and Thassa's Oracle didn't win, and he used his Tainted Pact Consult and Time Sieve to find the sweeper. Like, it was nice playing at that table. And
yeah, that sounds like super responsible. Like, rather than just jamming a win, it's like, what can I do to ensure that I can keep playing the game, right? Especially if you feel like your line might not be safe in that moment, right?
And I think that's actually really clever. Like, that person could live their whole life like, I should have just jammed the Oracle. But they could also, like, stopping on Dam, both Thrasios and me are likely to help you fight over the Dam to stuff Najila. But we're all going to stop you from Oracling if we can. And you're dead on board. So it actually seems like the higher percentage play to see another draw step and get another line. But
yeah, because like if that Thoracle win gets stuffed, you're done. You're going to get swung at for combat, and then you're going to lose regardless. But if you can sweep, maybe you can draw yourself another out. Maybe you can figure something out. You hit the Mnemonic Betrayal on your next draw step, and now you have something to do, right?
Right, yeah.
So that is kind of like a heads-up play, and it's cool to have. It's cool to have the games where everybody does what feels like the right thing.
I want to talk about one more play in this game because it was an absolute delight to do, and it plays into the responsibility of the pod. So Najila starts, Tivit in second has a Mystic Remora. I think it was Timna Thrasios, whatever Thrasios deck was. No, it was Tevesh. Tevesh Thrasios. Yeah, the Tevesh Thras deck also has Mystic Remora. And then I have Sarah Ascendant, so just 6/6, no draws off the fish, let's party. And then it goes back around the table. Tivit pays for the fish, and Thraz is thinking. Like, I could tell he's in the tank about, like, do I pay for this fish or not? Because it drew 0 cards on the turn cycle. And I showed him Draneth Magistrate in my hand, and I was like, if you want Thrasios, you better not pay for that fish. And he was like, yeah, that's fair, and let his fish die, like, drawing 0 cards. And, like, it made sense for me because I don't want to play into fish, and I want everyone to have a blocker for Najeela that's in play. So, like, I just got to flash a card, and he's just like, yeah, this goes straight into the graveyard, play Thrasios, pass, and then we got to stable up the board a little bit, clear a fish. That was nice.
Yeah, and you know that he's not going to try to fight over your Draneth because because
he might fight to protect it.
Yeah, right. So that's a super heads up play. That's super fun. That's like really cool to hear about, actually. That you're just like, hey man, that fish is dying, right? Like that's so cool. So yeah, and then you took down that pod in top 16, knocking Jason off of the pedestal of being the favored player at the event, and playing against some really unique and cool decks. Tevesh, Thrasios, Tivit, those are like sizable decks, and no joke to see in a top 16. And
we also, sorry, one last thing from that game.
Yeah,
we experienced the actual, like, Twitter hypothetical of, do you pack to save the table if you can't pay for it? Because I went for, whenever it was at the end of the game, whatever smoke cleared where I had an ad nauseum on the stack, the table fought over it, and it was just the Najeela player left who hadn't been engaged in the stack. And they were like, you got anything? And he's like, just this. And it was a pact, and he only had 4 mana. And Tivit was like, someone could wheel. And he was just like, I'm not casting it. So, like, he was next in turn order. Unless I wheel him into fast mana, he's dead, and then Tivit gets another crack at the win. So, I mean, the played your outs of, like, you're 0% dead, or you're 0% alive too. But in this case, it was you're also 0% alive, because I'm just going to pass the turn and you lose. It's not like there's 3 players between us and someone might wheel or whatever. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't have been mad at him for casting it, but it was interesting to actually see this thing play out in a high stakes match.
You never know how, like, a scenario like that's going to play out. And, like, something that I always advocate for is that if you're that player with the pact, and like you said, he's next in priority, right? Because he's next in turn order. As soon as that Adnaz was put on the stack, I would have just led with the pact and let the table fight ensue after that. Because the liability of your spell being the first on the stack, it's more likely that you might respond to it as Brian Koval. Now, you might not, because you're like, best removal is play removal, and this guy's out of the game, right? But if you fought over the Adnaz in the first place, then you might fight his spell in response, and then you don't no longer have to worry. But the longer you hold on to it, the more likely that no one has an answer for it if you put it on the stack. And so in that scenario, that would be like the only thing I would look at. And also, you're in top 16. There's no drawing, so like it doesn't boost your win percentage really at all if you can't pay for it, because in a Swiss round, I'll pack that all day because I'd rather the game go to a draw than me lose. But in that scenario, there is no draw. When you lose, you lose, right? There's no time in round or anything like that. So I think Jason probably made the right decision there, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, once again, I play decks and Magic like you should answer the things that come your way. So if my Naus got pacted, or if I had to spend an extra piece of interaction on it, I would have, taken that in stride and gone around the table one more time, tried to figure it out. But it was cool to see it in action, and he did not pull the trigger.
Yeah, I respect Jason as a player a lot. We talked a lot during the weekend since I also have been playing Najeela for a bit now, and his insights were really good, and for his first ever cEDH tournament, he really showed up. So it was really cool to hear from him, and he was a pretty responsible player. So hearing that out of you about that pod is really it speaks volumes. Mm-hmm. So then you win the semifinals pod, and then you work your way into the finals pod. And what a finals pod it was! You had Malcolm Beckford going first, playing 5-color Sisay, which is super cool. A deck that you never see in the finals of events like this. So to see a player bring that deck and make it that far was awesome. You had Connor. Connor's a good friend of mine. He's been a Dargo brewer for super long and was on a hot streak on day 2 to really bring Dargo into the finals there. And then you had Mike Sad, previous Punt City champion, squeezing
running
his
for
way.
re-election as the mayor of Punt City.
Yep, the mayor of Punt City running for re-election. We had it on the stream and everything. It was so cool. Really squeezing his way in. Like day one, wasn't doing so hot. Day two, won every single game that he played up until the finals, and just on a hot streak to make it back into the finals. I remember day one. At the end of day one, he comes up to me and he's like, "Yeah, I think I might drop. Not really feeling it. Not really feeling myself." And then day two just goes on a tear with Winota. And then Brian Colville, Oktoberfest champion, 16th on breakers, winning out on day two after round 7 to make it to the finals. And why don't you tell me like a little bit about the atmosphere at that pod and what it was like? It wasn't an egregiously long game like Oktoberfest was. It was relatively short for a finals match. But like, was there a lot of table talk? I know you and Mike know each other pretty well. So how are things going when that game started?
The game basically started by me telling everyone I'm a 0 Winota Triggers gamer. Like, I will work with you to give Mike nothing on this battlefield. And cEDH might want a Winota trigger here and there because they're also kind of a stacks deck. So, like, maybe that's not the best ally to make. And Jun Dargo, like, what are they going to do? So it might have been a tough pod to, like, lead on that level of politicking. But I say that every time Winota's at the table. Like, Tabo, one trigger's enough to end a game. Let's not give him anything. And then let's play like gentle people once Winota's not a factor. But Mike's really good at that soft politicking. Like, he's not yelling, he's not swearing, he's not calling anyone names. He's just like, oh man, Dockside's so big right now. Like, when there's a dress down in play and like just trying to get people to do the wrong thing. And I just watched him do it in his top 16 pod where him and Shauna were facing down Florian after Dan got eliminated. And Florian, there was a Draneth Magistrate in play, and Mike was just like, oh, this Florian's going to see a lot of cards. And Shauna hydroblasted it, and then ended up dying because she couldn't stop Winota on Mike's next turn, which that hydroblast would have done. Florian's literally 3/3 first strike with no additional text, and Mike just like said a little thing, and hydroblast hit the stack. So that sort of thing I'm hyper in tune with when I play against Mike, and I made a point to erode all his credibility immediately. At one point, he was like, I was resolving a Wishclaw Talisman, and he's like, we're about to lose to Breach. And I was like, dude, you have Draneth and Ethersworn Cannons in play. You're just, nobody's going to believe anything you say from this point on. And he did less talking after that. I also said at one point, I understand talking is the only agency Winota offers, but it's not working here. And so there was like 3 attempts at him to Jedi mind trick us, and all 3 times I Darth Vadered him. And but that pod was scary. Like, the vibe was good, everyone was having fun, but I don't know what cEDH is. Like, I know that there's like the Rebel Jeggy Naus thing, and then there's like I heard whispers that this was a stacks deck, and I just like don't know what could be in a 5-color deck. And format, not knowing every little thing about the format really hurt me there. And then this Jun Dargo deck, like, this deck's gonna go fast. I don't know what's in it, but you don't register Jun Dargo to be here for a long time.
Yeah.
And then freaking Winota. So, and I'm in 4th position because 16th on breakers. But it's okay, because over the 9 rounds I played, I think I was in 1st once, 2nd twice, and 3rd twice, and then 4th every other round. So I was used to playing from the bottom, but I did something I don't normally do, which is keep a like Savage all-in Dockside hand. My hand was like 1 land, and it was Forbidden Orchard, which is the worst land in the deck. It's a necessary evil, but it's terrible. Simeon Spirit Guide, J-Lo Dockside. And like, I can at least play Timna. I'm in 4th position against the Stax pod. Dockside should be good for something. I can Spirit Guide it out, then add Timna and or Crom, depending on how deep we go. And when we got to my turn, Dockside was good for 0. Like, I ended up having to J-Lo Spirit Guide tap Forbidden Orchard just to cast Crom and pass the turn. And Dockside did nothing. And I was pretty sure I had already lost at that point. Like, no way all 3 of these players are just going to let this Crom hang out for the whole game. And I'm going to get red blasted and lose on the spot. I'm not doing anything. This was a bad keep. What have I done with my life? And then Crom resolved. And then on the next go around, Dockside was good for a few. And then on the next go around, I resolved a Wishclaw House. I don't remember all the order it was in. I didn't find a second land ever, but I did find Mana Crypt and Mana Vault and Wishclaw Talisman, and I wished for a Rhystic Study just to be in the game. So, and on that final turn cycle, I passed the turn with pretty much Crom, Rhystic in play, and I think Vamp Tutor in my hand, and was like, okay, off we go again. I had Mental Misstep as well, because I fought over the Swan Song on the Culling Ritual, because I wanted the Dargo's Culling Ritual to resolve, and I just bet that I could beat whatever came out of the back end, but I know it would take Mike out of the game. And I wanted a clear board to let my Rhystic and Crom do their thing, and not only did fighting over the ritual work, but help me put Pier on the stack. Let's go. And the Pier happened to be the second spell, which triggered Crom, and then I could Vamp Tutor for the SWAT and draw it with the Crom, and then draw another 40 cards, and just nobody did anything. And
well, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to answer 40 cards.
Yeah.
I remember watching the stream and how funny it was. That like I don't know what the talk was at the table, but we could pan to the players, and it kind of looked like you kind of being like, do we really have to do this? And then like dumping all your win conditions on the stack and just being like, this is what I got.
Yeah, I mean, I try that every time. My hand is just full of everything. Like, I will play it out, but I do value my own time and the time of everyone else. I try to give them that basic amount of respect. But like, yeah, after like the Pier resolved and Mike didn't do anything on his turn, I just like laid down Grand Abolisher, Oracle, Consult, and was like, are we good? And they were like, yes, we are. So
they do at that point. Yeah.
Right.
Some interesting things that you kind of mentioned during that I'd like to touch on. The first of which I'm dying laughing, is just talking about like the political prowess of Mike Sad, because it is like, it's insane. Like the subtleties of what's being said at the table. It's just enough to be like, yeah, well, Mike's a nice guy, and he's probably right. Like, this Florian's gonna get a lot of cards, and what if he removes the Draneth? Like, I should Hydroblast it, right? And like, just all these different like subtlety things that trick people, and they trick people a lot. And that, in essence, like how you treated that, is also kind of table police, right? Because you're like, hey, don't trust this guy. He's not looking out for you. He's only looking out for himself. And like, don't make a poor decision because of his words, right? And right. It's kind of funny to have to do that. And we play a lot, like Mike and I and all of our friends, and it's like a common nomenclature between us that like, just get the person that talks the most to shut up, and usually you'll win the game. And you've done it to me before. Like, I like to play with my mouth a lot, and so you've just been like, hey, cut it out because it ain't working. And I'm like, oh shit.
I have done this for most of my competitive Magic career, which is I model the opposite of whatever my opponent is doing. If they're playing fast, I will just take a deep breath, draw my card like real slow, think for a second, play my land. I'll tap each one, announce my spell slowly, like kind of at the pace I'm talking now. If they're in a hurry, I'm pulling them out of it. If they're playing slow, I'm going to play fast and try to like wiggle it loose a little bit, like whatever they want to do. And If they're talking a lot, I'm silent. If they're not talking at all, I'm cracking jokes. Like, this is less important than building your deck and playing Magic well by a lot. So people who value like politicking and is like the social behavior of playing any heads up strategy game, make sure that you have that on the hierarchy correctly. It's very low, but if you're at a proficient level of play and looking to add another layer, I will do the opposite of whatever my opponent is doing and just try to flip the script on them, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And like some pretty sound advice, I'd say. As long as you know, like, okay, you're a good enough player that it's time to start politicking. Like, that's when you should get into it. Don't be like, I'm the best, I'm a smooth talker and this is gonna win me all my games, because it doesn't work that way. Trust me, there's a reason why my nickname is O3 Drop. It's because I play with my mouth a little bit more than I should.
And I this is one of my high horse podium pedestal conversations about politicking, is that when people, especially 60 card grinders, because that's the group I'm coming from, I know what they say when they're invited to play cEDH or regular EDH. They're like, if 3 people want to kill me, then I can't win. I'm not interested in that. Well, that just doesn't hold up, because 3 people don't want to die this turn. And it doesn't matter who's friends with who. Only one person can win the pot, and there's no second place. So, like, politicking doesn't mean what people outside the format think it does. And even people inside the format, when we talk about those little, like, Mike said, oh, Dockside's so big, or oh, he's going to get breach here, like, those are a smooth level of politicking. But Mike also does, like, face up politicking, which also happened in that top 16 pod of Dan was presenting a protected win. And that was true. Shauna needed Mike to kill Dan. Mike needed Shauna not to kill him until he was too far ahead for it to matter. And making real arguments on the board of, Dan is going to win this game and he's ahead of you, Shauna. Like, help me out here. Don't kill Winota. I'll attack Dan with everything. Like, that's better. Like, strategic politicking rather than brain games or Jedi mind tricks. Like, my politicking at a table is I point out things that are true and then let smart people make decisions with that information. Mm-hmm. And if they're not picking up what I'm putting down, I will spell it out for them more directly. Yeah. And, like, Rogsai, one card out of Rogsai is worth more than one card out of basically any other deck, because they have every tutor, they have every wheel, things can flip on the spot. So if we're going to pay for one Rhystic this turn cycle, it should be Rogsai. Like, that's like something I'll say out loud, which is obviously, take it with a grain of salt if I'm the one with the second Rhystic. But, like, I would say that if I did not have a Rhystic and someone else did, like, pay for Rogs, not Tivits, you know? Yeah. These sort of things. Matt Sperling, I think, said it some version of tournament cEDH, your first job is to help people not lose to themselves. And that is, I have found that to be mostly true. Like, there's a lot of information to process, and, like, some people you could tell are focused on their own plan, not realizing the rug's about to be pulled out from under them from somewhere else. Some people are so hyper-focused on, like, oh, Tim Necrom's at the table. I heard that every time I sat down, like, oh, great, we got Blue Farm at the table. But there's also, like, Tivit and Rogsai, which are top 5 decks as well. Or, like, Najeela's in the pod, and they're like, oh, we got a Blue Farm. And, like, you got to reframe and help people recognize, like, Najeela is Derevi away from victory. Why are you worried about my Ragavan? Like, you just got to help people understand that kind of stuff. Like, that Swords to Plowshares that I see you thumbing in your hand, do not point it at my Timna right now.
Like, now is not the time. Like,
right.
There's better options. Yeah.
Right.
And then the last thing I want to touch on too, like, right before we probably end it, is you mentioned, like, the Sisei deck and kind of not knowing what the Sisei deck is and hearing rumors and only hearing it from other people. that can be like really dangerous, specifically in EDH, because there's so much variance and so many things that not having the knowledge of what a deck is or what a deck does can really hurt you if you're not aware of what its win conditions are. And I feel like that's how Malcolm was able to get so far in this event. Not only is he like a really good pilot that knows his deck inside and out, but Sisay, even though it's played by very popular people like Rebel, like you said, for example, has a lot of mysteriousness to it because the combos are very weird and awkward. Like you mentioned that you thought that this might be a stacks deck. It's actually like not a stacks deck at all. It's like it runs 7 planeswalkers, and the entire combos of the deck are through utilizing infinite mana to activate these planeswalkers like infinite amount of times and get infinite value with things like Amanatu and stuff like that. And it just plays really well into stacks. And I bring it up because we had an instance in the top 16 where I believe Bryant Cook, Alana, and Michael Mapson were all in a pod with the Sisay player. And the Sisay player was able to convince Michael to like tutor a stacks piece into play that completely hosed the entire table except themselves.
Right,
and,
yeah. So that's why I thought going into top 4 that Sisay was a stacks deck, but it's actually just a deck that plays well through stacks now that I'm hearing this, because what happened was Michael could have put Trinisphere or Damping Sphere into play. Trinisphere locks out the 2 Rogsai players from interacting at all, and Sisay doesn't care one bit. Damping Sphere shuts off infinite mana loops and infinite storm loops and dockside loops and all this stuff. And Sisay cares a lot. And Sisay convinced Mapson, like basically, these 2 dirty storm wizards over here will not be able to beat Trinisphere. And he's like, yeah, you're right. Bam. And then they all died on the spot.
Yeah. And like that's one of the things about like if you don't know a deck well enough, like it can be really dangerous. And like for Michael there, it was super dangerous because Michael's like, how do I ensure I get another turn in this game? And by taking the advice of someone else who knew their deck better, they were able to get something favorable for them. And so your finals pod was really just super cool and interesting. And like the deflecting spot on the PETA, oh my God, that's everybody's dream. That's so fucking fun. And the way it played out too, with like, you have a peer onto the stack. And I remember I was like running the chat stream, and the PETA was put on the stack, and like I have a lot of liberties with the chat stream for Eminence. So I'm like, somebody put a SWAT on this shit. And then like you cast the Vamp Tutor, and we're all like silent. We're like, oh my gosh, do we think what's happening is happening? And then like, yeah, sure enough, you put the deflecting spot on the stack, and everybody lost it. I think our viewers on that stream jumped from like, it was at like 200, 230, immediately to 300 as soon as the SWAT went on. Like it went on Twitter. People were in the chat like, I heard there's a SWAT on a PETA. And like before the spell could even resolve, it like blew up, and it was so much fun. And
I did rewatch the finals pod, the coverage, the Twitch pod later, and not be like, I know the format, but like I've said, not in the way that someone who only studies cEDH does. Like, I honestly don't really think about or play cEDH unless I have a stream appearance or a tournament coming up, and I'm focusing on like Legacy or Modern or brewing whatever deck for my channel is coming up tomorrow. Like, this is not my Magic life, even though I do like it a lot. And when the peer hit the stack, I was like, my brain was like, I have Vamp Tutor. I can counter this. Wait, I have Deflecting SWAT. I've heard about this before. And then I looked over at the PETA to make sure it was target player, and I didn't invent this in my head. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so sick. I'm going to look so smart. This is amazing. And when I rewatched the stream, I cast the Vamp, and Scoots, just without changing his tone at all, was just like, yeah, this is going to get Deflecting SWAT. Just like, yeah, thanks, Scoots. Play it up a little bit.
it's
like very obvious play, like for anyone who knows about it. But for me in the moment, I was like,
you're like,
here it is.
This is my moment.
Yeah, the Vince McMahon meme. I was just like, eyes getting bigger.
That's, yeah. No, it was, but like, even if Scoots didn't play it up as much as he could have, the chat was going wild.
Yeah, the chat was bonkers for sure.
They were like, "Holy shit, the mayor's being overthrown! This is a tyranny!" Like it was just like things are going wild, and it was an amazing moment, and it was one of the best. Like for a tournament like that, I would have to say it was one of like the best ways to see it end, was something that like it's like a mythos, it's like legend, right? Like, oh my god, you can swat a PETA, but it'll never happen because who's playing PETA? And then it happens in a tournament to win it in the finals. Like it was super cool. And like you said, you looked out of it for like a majority of that game. Like you had one land in play, you casted a dockside for like 4, and it was like, okay, and then you got the Rhystic Study, and it's like, okay, we're playing catch up. And then immediately went from catch up to I'm winning the game.
Yeah, I gave the Turbo Naus deck Wishclaw Talisman because I felt like that person was closest to my pocket of needing to figure out a way out of this Sisay Winota squeeze. And I don't know if they tutored the PETA or tutored the Necro, but I have to imagine it was the PETA because it's the spell they led on. But
it might have been the Culling Writ, actually.
That came from the graveyard because it had been countered once before and was Noxious Revivaled back on this turn cycle.
Because I know I talked to Connor after the event, and he was like, "Yeah, I fucked up." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "I had PETA and Razaketh in my hand, and I chose PETA." No. And so there was just like a lot of cool that I think that pod ended up the way it should have ended with the amount of hype that was going into it and like how cool that was. So
yeah, that was a lot of fun. And honestly, I would have responded to any engine. Like, so I could have tutored anything there. So if the hand at the end was PETA, Raz, and Necro, like I would have tutored Force of Will for Razaketh. I don't think there was 15 mana in the pool. There was enough to Naus and Necro, but not enough to Naus and Raz, right? Or
there was enough. There was enough to. There was a line where the Necro could have been cast after the fact, but
right.
Yeah,
so
it was just like after the PETA, it was like very debilitating, I think.
Yeah, if he led on Necro, I would have tutored like Fierce Guardianship to keep that out of play, almost certainly, and then Pier hits. So I'm glad the Turbo Naus deck just Turbo Naused instead of playing the bait spell. Though I guess Necro is a turn pass thing, and I could fight over Fear or Final Fortune if he hits it. But yeah, I don't know. Like I'm probably vamping for an answer to whatever goes on this deck first in that spot. So. Not to haunt Connor's dreams with that, but I probably like I'm a responsible player. If you show me a game winner, I'm going to counter it, even if it's Necro. Especially since you just tutored, you could be holding the Final Fortune. So
yeah, exactly.
I'm going to respect it. But I was told some amazing stats by the Eminence squad after the tournament. There were 14 Timnacrom players, which is close to 10% of the field. There was 158 players or whatever.
Yeah, after official day one, there was 158 players.
Right, so we're like 2 people away from 10% of the field. Massive representation. Not one Timnacrom player had a positive record in the Swiss. I was 3-3-1, so I was straight up even Steven through the Swiss, and everyone else was worse than me.
Oh, wow.
And there was only one top 16 conversion. It was me. And only one deck won the tournament, so whatever, haters.
Yeah, I mean, if you like, even on EDH top 16, it's got like not the best conversion rate in tournaments.
Right. Yeah. And I played multiple Blue Farm Mirrors throughout the tournament, and all of them had Cavern of Souls. So for folks who are just like looking at tournament winning lists and rocking them, like do the work, make sure you know the role. If somebody copies my list and plays it like Turbo Naus, you're going to lose a lot. Like you got to understand all of the choices because this deck doesn't play itself. There was recently like a Twitter thread about Timnacrom playing itself, and pilots have not earned their success because the deck is so powerful that they didn't have to do the work to get wins or whatever. That's wrong. I mean, there is the who cares? Like, is Def Leppard the only band that counts in history because everyone else's drummer had two arms? Like, what are you talking about? Like, you don't have to make it harder on yourself just for it to count. But that's preposterous. But also, this deck does not play itself. There's lines on lines, your tutors, your combo control, your tempo. Like, you are everything, and frequently you're every existing game role in Magic the Gathering in a single game, and you have to. Sometimes it turns mid-turn, like I'm the tempo deck, but then you're Tim that draws Silence Breach, and you're like, oh, I'm a combo deck. So this thing does not play itself. Make sure you know what you're doing, get your reps, understand the card choices, and understand that this deck does not really have a puncher's chance the way like Winota or a Turbo Naus deck does, or even Tivit, just like resolve your commander, let's party. You're going to work for all your wins with this, and if that's not what you want, don't come this way, for real.
Yeah. Stay away. All right, you're looking at a man that's worked for every win he's had, and we got 2 tournaments under his belt. So, check the scoreboard if you want to be it. You got to grind, right? So, right. I think we're gonna wrap that up here, Brian. But I want to say thank you so much for joining us again. Congratulations on winning another cEDH tournament. Now that you have 2 rings, do you think you're going to retire, or do you want to go? Are you going to Tom Brady it? Go for 5, go for 7. What are you thinking?
I have already booked travel for the cookout, and I'm already planning on being at Windmill Slam. And I actually got invited to Cash Cards Unlimited, their big time twister event, but it's on the same day as my cousin's wedding, and I just want to jump off a friggin' bridge because of that. I'm already committed to a stupid family thing. I'd rather be collecting cEDH titles, so you will see me at the things I can get to, for sure.
Hell yeah. And then before we wrap up, what is BoshNRoll got going on? Is there anything that you want to plug, anything that you want to talk about before while people still have you here?
In the BoshNRoll YouTube channel, always daily Eternal Magic the Gathering, non-rotating constructed, every weekday. Eternal Glory podcast, our episode that just came out this week, our back end, the last 20 minutes, we talked about Punt City and cEDH, so check that out. Also sponsored by Eminence. Shout out to them. They're really covering the spread here.
Hell yeah.
And I will be a featured creator at the upcoming SCG Con / Command Fest Richmond. So if you want to hang out with me, my creator badge comes with entry to one-shot events, and there's like 4 cEDH pods being fired over the weekend, and I'm going to use them for those 4 events. So
that's awesome.
I will be around. I'm accessible. Hit me up. See you on the internet.
Absolutely. And we're going to have all your links down in the description. We're going to have the link to your deck list. We're going to have a link to the Punt City 2 tournament standings, so everybody can go check that out, and then to your channel and to the Eternal Glory podcast too, because that's like one of my favorite podcasts that I listen to as like another podcast creator. Eternal Glory is like one of my favorites. You Bryant and Phil do like an awesome job, so it's super cool to hear that. And then, so we're going to move into our cleanup then. So thank you to our sponsors of our show. Thank you to the Mana Vault, LGS. They've been awesome to us. They support Naus, and they support our local cEDH community. So thank you so much to them. Thank you to Eminence Gaming for running amazing events, giving us data-driven content, helping us continue to grow this community and grow far beyond just the online scene. We really appreciate that, and they do amazing work for cEDH and soon all formats as a whole. And then, again, we'd like to thank all of our high-tier patrons. So thank you to Doot, Usable Object, Senator Tom, Scorish, Unorthodox Bird, MP Pfefferman, Jeff Bezos, Domino, Just Ice, Geos Justin, and our resident Chad Naus patron, Valhalla C. If you'd like to support us, you can do so at patreon.com/sadnaus. And if you haven't already joined our Discord, get in there. Brian Koval's in there. He's super active. No, that's a lie, but it exists. We're talking, we're playing all the time. And it's a good place if you want like genuine cEDH content and cEDH advice. It's not your typical content creator Discord where it's dead and nobody's talking about shit. We have active members daily. All of the Sadnaus crew are in there active daily, and you can hear about tournaments, tournament results, and help us prepare for tournaments where we scrub out of the event, I guess. We had Kean and Spencer almost made top 16 at Punt City. They lost on breakers, but they did really, really good that weekend as well. And other than that, whether you're listening on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, drop us a review, or share us with your friends. That's the best thing you can do if you want to support the channel, is share us with your friends, get them watching our content, and get them loving it like you do. It gives us the opportunity to work with new people like Brian and other content creators, and just keep making content for people like you. And with that, we're going to end the episode here. So you have a great week, and we'll see you on the next